What's up, FA Nation? Welcome to the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream for Tuesday's 8-game main slate. What was that?
Oh yeah, 8
Oh
games.
yeah, I thought I messed something up. I feel like it was pretty smooth, and then I hear some random noise from I didn't know what was going on. But I digress, John. You were the man behind the scenes, typing away on your computer like a madman with the playbook today. Every piece of content you can imagine is out right now. But John, how are you feeling about the 8-game slate we have on tap today, brother?
A lot of injuries.
Well, that is very
fair. One
team
has a lot of injuries, for sure. That's opening up some pretty, interesting value, we'll say. That's going to make this slate probably a lot more stars and scrubby than, initially expected to be.
Stars and scrubby is such a gray area, I think, with the both of us. You're more of a fair and balanced guy. I like to spend up, but I really hate dipping my toes in like just complete stars and scrub.
Right.
But we do have 8 games on the slate. I think it is worth mentioning that the game totals aren't great tonight, right? I mean, we have the Portland Sacramento late night hammer that is an appealing 222.5. Still interesting. It's only a 2-point spread with the latest De'Aaron Fox news. Brooklyn, Utah is up to 219.5. And LA, Phoenix is 220. Other than that, nothing that really stands out. I guess Cleveland, Philly stands out. We saw it start at 214.5 and it's at 219, but it's an 11-point spread. So do we really want to attack that, especially in cash games? I'm not sure, but let's dive into the plays. As always, we'll do position by position. We'll start at the point guard position. Again, tons of injuries, so we're not going to run down the list because we will be here until 6:30 and the live stream will be over. So let's just start at the point guard position, John.
Okay.
We're at the top of the list. We have Damian Lillard and Trae Young. They're clearly the two top guys. I mean, you can throw Kyrie into that mix as well. He'll be less than 5% owned, it would be my guess. If you had to lean either Lillard or Young's way, which would you lean? And then why don't you just break down the rest of the point guard position afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, obviously, to, look at what Dame Lillard's done and go against it. He's averaging 55. I think it is fantasy points on DraftKings over the last 5 games. The DraftKings price is really where I'm taking a look. He's the top price guy over on FanDuel, so he is more expensive, and you have to pay for him to hit the value. Usually against Sacramento, that's an automatic. I wouldn't even take 2 seconds to think about it. But De'Aaron Fox is not playing tonight, which means Corey Joseph is going to start. Joseph historically has a reputation of being a much better defender than Fox. It doesn't take much to be a better defender than Fox, but generally speaking, Joseph is a better overall defensive player, so maybe that gives Lillard a little bit of trouble. But again, as I said, you're at this point, not many teams are giving Dame Lillard too much trouble. On the flip side of that, same thing kind of goes for Trae Young. He's got 4 games now of over 30 actual points rather. He's hit 60 fantasy points or 50 fantasy points a handful of times. The one worry here is that they're going to be in Denver. Obviously, that's kind of a tougher spot for some to play in. But again, the way that he's playing right now is absolutely out of his mind. I would suspect that maybe he would draw a Gary Harris defensive assignment and not Jamal Murray, because I think then it would just be an absolute shootout between the two guards if that ended up being the case. But Trae Young is very, very, very good at getting his own shot. So, Harris can ride him on his hip as much as he wants, but Young's going to get open. Young's going to take his shots. For me, those are my 2 top guys at the point guard position. For sure, there are other plays, that I think you can take a look at up there. If you wanted to spend up, especially again on DraftKings where the salary is super flexible. But if I'm looking at those 2 primarily as my top 2 spends. If we're looking in the mid-tier, I already mentioned Jamal Murray. Again, he went off against the 76ers for 53 fantasy points the other night. That's just sort of what his upside is. You have to catch him on the right night. Atlanta typically is the target for a lot of times when we're playing point guards because Trae Young really only focuses on the offensive side of the basketball. He's a very small guy. So Mario really wouldn't have much trouble, on the offensive end if Young was to draw his assignment. But Ricky Rubio is really flashing lately. And, he's looking sort of like the Rubio he was back when he was with Minnesota, when he was getting, low-end triple-doubles and the steals total, 1.8 steals per game this year. Really thriving in that improving Phoenix team. They're at home. It could be an interesting matchup for him to sort of rise to the level, going up against LeBron, going up against Anthony Davis. Rajon Rondo now expected to play. That will be an interesting back-and-forth matchup between the two. So I definitely think as sort of a contrarian GPP option, I'm a big fan of Rubio for sure. He just had 51 fantasy points against the Nets. Again, we like to attack the Nets. Someone that I don't have in the playbook, but I know you're high on, is Mike Conley. 31 minutes last night, coming off the back-to-back. But as we mentioned, Kyrie Irving defense is non-existent this year. Pretty much anybody that's a point guard going up against Brooklyn has kind of gone off. And Conley, right at that, was he 63 on both sites, I think he is?
6,200 on DK. Okay.
So he's in that mid-tier range there for you guys. And then with all the injury news, Goran Dragic has to be someone that we're taking a look at here. Tyler Herro's been ruled out. No Justice Winslow. There's no James Johnson. They're just severely depleted there.
Justice Winslow.
Yeah, is ruled out. Yeah, so just severely depleted there. So you got to think, even if Dragic doesn't start, none starts with Butler and Robinson. Dragic's going to come off the bench, play 30-plus minutes more than likely, and his offensive upside right now is really strong. Going up against Detroit, who we've been talking with point guards all season. So even if he ends up getting second unit Detroit guys, that's even better. So big fan there, Dragic. And then Joseph, I mentioned at the top discussing Lillard. He's your value play at point guard tonight. He's $3,700 across both sites. You can look at our ownership projections. We have him over 50%. Again, we talk stars and scrubs. There's a lot of Miami value, but at the point guard position, Joseph's where we're going.
Are you eating the Joseph chalk tonight, John?
I am. I'm not one to fade the value chalk. I'll live and die by that. If he goes and gives me 16 fantasy points, so be it. Me and half the field plus are going to have that as well. I do like to build a more fair and balanced lineup, so you're not wrong there. But, I also don't want to fall too far behind if those studs go off for 60 or 70 fantasy points. Then my fair and balanced lineup doesn't really do me much good there.
Even at 3,700, though, if he gives us 16, it's really not bad.
Yeah, exactly. We need 18.5 fantasy points at 3,700 to get you the 5x. And he's a defensive player, so steals can get there. You mentioned on the podcast last night he's got 3 blocks over the last 2 games as well. As many times as Lillard shoots, there's an opportunity for that. So for sure.
Yeah, especially considering how ball dominant he is. I mean, we see all the top usage players are kind of the league leaders in turnovers because they have the ball in their hands so much. Love that call. Let's move over to shooting guard, where we have Jimmy Butler topping the list. 9,400 on FanDuel seems kind of steep. I think there are probably other options there, but I mean, he is projected 20% ownership, probably because the Heat just don't have anybody available tonight. So I see why that would be a chalky play. And then you have a bunch of interesting plays. We've tilted on Zach LaVine so much this year, and I don't blame you for putting him in here, but just looking at his name is tilting me, even as a Bulls fan, just knowing that the upside is there and it's against the Knicks, but he just hasn't been getting it done more often than not. And then I love a couple guys here. I actually love a couple of these guys. I think Donovan Mitchell, great play. I mean, that you'll elaborate on. RJ Barrett, who I don't buy that ownership projection. I don't. I think he's going to be lower owned than that. I think a lot of people are off of him probably, right? Because of
I think all the injuries, especially on DraftKings at least, you're going to go ahead and get a lot of Butler ownership.
Right.
I think that's going to be the case. So I can see on DraftKings maybe Barrett being less of owned than usual. Maybe at a $5,900 price tag, but I mean, that's one of the reasons I like him. I talked about, in the playbook, the last time this matchup happened, I put RJ Barrett as the cover photo of the playbook. I was just so in on him, and he went for 19 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists in that game. 15 rebounds, unrealistic really for that to reoccur, but the Bulls are one of the worst rebounding teams, if not the worst rebounding team.
The worst.
The worst.
Currently by a significant margin, the worst.
So, I mean, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility for him to put up a decent rebounding total again.
Right.
We know the shots are certainly going to go his way. The minutes are certainly going to be there as long as Fizdale isn't feeling the pull of the leash there. So, yeah, I like it. I think this is a good spot for him. Kind of go back to the plus again. That DraftKings price tag at $5,900. Love them in GPPs. What I'm expecting to be, under 10%.
Can we? I don't want to spoil the ownership for not everyone that has purchased the package, but can we just talk about Bogdanovich's? Because if that's going to be the ownership, John, and we'll let you in 6% projection. If it's going to be 6%, and let's say you're playing 10 lineups, we're going to have 100% exposure to the guy, right? I mean,
I have a lot of exposure to him. 30 minutes the last two games, or in that range, is really what we're looking for. No Fox. You got to think that there's going to be a increase in overall production there for him. So yeah, I'm fine with him. I didn't, I call it the quote unquote inception post. Talked about Buddy Hield there. He's the GPP play. I think, I know Bogdan can go across the platforms if you need the salary space. But I mean, you're going up against Portland here. I think this is a really, really good spot for Hield. You can certainly game stack this game and have a really good chance to go ahead and chase down, some of your opponents there. Because of course, this is the late night hammer. So I'm loving the fact that it is that 222 total. The highest of the slate, only the 2-point spread. So definitely get your game stacks in there using that Miami value. I think this is a really good opportunity.
Speaking of Miami value, one more member of the shooting guard position is Duncan Robinson. Do you think we haven't seen the starting lineup yet, but do you think Duncan Robinson starts here tonight? And if so, would you consider him cash viable if he starts?
I think Duncan Robinson has to start. I mean, he had been starting when Winslow was out regardless. So given just sort of everybody else that's ruled out, I would expect him to start. I guess they could possibly go Dragic and non-Butler, Olynyk, and Bam, right? I think
Dragic. I think there is no way that Spoelstra ever starts Dragic again.
Yeah, he's too effective off the bench.
No, and him and Butler are the perfect bob and weave. Jimmy's going to start. He's going to come out of the game, and Dragic is going to take all the usage on the second unit.
And if you aren't aware, there's going to be a tweet at some point in time today that's going to go out and being like, the Heat have 8 guys available tonight. That usually happens when there's so many injuries. I think everybody that's in that rotation is going to play 30-plus minutes tonight, barring, injury or foul trouble. Maybe the only active player that won't reach that will be Udonis Haslem, who I just realized was still in the NBA. If he's even active tonight, he showed up on DraftKings projections. I was like, Haslam's still rocking out. Good for him. I think Robinson has to be in your lineup, assuming he's going to play 25 to 30 minutes. I
agree, and we should look for that. Move over to small forward. We have LeBron. We don't need to expand on the triple-double machine?
I would expand on, and it was something that is in the playbooks alluded to, and you brought it up again. Well, you and I were discussing it off air. Is the Anthony Davis injury, and I put that it's something worth monitoring, as if maybe he gets a late scratch, and then you'll have LeBron ownership there. But also, he admitted in game the other day that he re-injured his arm.
Yeah, when Siakam destroyed him on that block.
So he just played through the young. But Anthony Davis isn't one to play through injury for very long. Maybe this is a different version of Anthony Davis, but one bad bump there by Aron Baynes at the rim or something like that, and maybe AD goes out, and now you got LBJ sort of all by his lonesome there running that team. So I like him. I think he can be viable in all options, and especially on DraftKings where you look at that current again under 10% projected ownership. It's pretty decent. It's pretty good bet.
I think you bring up a really good point about Aron Baynes specifically, considering you've watched Aron Baynes for multiple years and how just physically I mean, he's just such a physical presence in the paint.
Yeah.
You don't know how Anthony Davis' shoulder is going to stand up against that, and especially with an offensive-minded Baynes as well as the defense.
Right.
If Baynes puts his shoulder into Davis' shoulder, that could be something worth monitoring. Kind of makes me like LeBron a little bit more. And plus, we talked about him and Rondo last year off air. The numbers don't drop off with Rondo on the floor. So fire up LeBron. Rest of the small forward position, I'm assuming you like Toby a little less with Ben Simmons active.
That would be true.
Yeah, especially with 11-point spread. Tough to go there over $7,000 on FanDuel, especially when you look at guys like Harrison Barnes, who could just play 48 minutes tonight and it wouldn't shock anybody. He's just playing every minute of every game right now, and he's putting up 30-plus fantasy points. And I think the rest of your small forward position, probably GPP guys. Will Barton, Marcus Morris, Luke Kennard. Why don't you expand on those three?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's mentioned Barnes, great cash game guy for me tonight. I think Gallinari's in that similar price point. Didn't make the playbook, but another guy that I always kind of throw out there in cash games. And his offensive upside's kind of boosted a little bit of late as well. Yeah, I mean, Will Barton, we're talking about it. You know, this is the Will Barton we saw 2-3 years ago. Fully recovered from the injury, and he's filling up the stat sheet. He's giving you some defensive metrics. He's scoring. Awesome spot for him tonight. He's either going up against the rookies and, Hunter or Reddish, or, he's going to get Schroder if they move him to small forward. Depending on the rotations, Barton can even go down and play shooting guard and get a good matchup there as well. I'm in on this Denver side because we just know Atlanta just up and down the board is just one of the worst defensive teams there is in the NBA.
Yeah, and it's a nice pace spot for Denver, too, considering how slow Denver is playing on a year-to-year basis. Surprisingly, when you look at Atlanta's pace, they're not playing fast, just over 101. It's 101 possessions per game, but Denver's dead last at 97. So, a 4-possession increase is worth mentioning. Let's move over to power forward, John, where we have Anthony Davis, and the projections are a little crazy, and I get it because, everyone thinks this is last year's Phoenix or the last, 3 years, 5 years, however long, but the post-Steve Nash-led Phoenix teams that just have been terrible. But it's not. It's a better team. And even you, before we got on there, was like, well, are they good? And yeah,
I still don't believe that they're good, but I mean,
they've beaten some good teams. Let's just say that they have gotten off to a good start, and they've beaten some teams that are predicted to compete this year in the league. So two remains to be seen on the end result for Phoenix, but I don't think 36%. I'm not doing it. I mean, you could do it. This is going to be a 50-point, 20-rebound game for Anthony Davis because we don't want to play him. And look what happened when we were 100% on James Harden last night. What you put him in the play? What are your thoughts on him tonight? He's in the playbook. He's the highest projected owned power forward, one of the highest projected owned players on the slate. What are your thoughts on Davis?
Just a GPP play for me. I said that in the playbook. I mean, he's super expensive. I am surprised that his ownership is as high as it is. We'll take that for what it's worth. There are obviously days where ownership is wrong. Certainly have seen it. So, I mean, I'm not expecting him to be that high ownership, but I mean, he is Anthony Davis. There's still tremendous upside here in this spot. So, I felt the need to put him in there given the matchup. And, if he is healthy and plays the minutes, the upside is certainly there for him. I like more so the guys below. Julius Randle gets no Mitchell Robinson there. Right. So, we see his kind of usage spike up a little bit. Fantasy points per minute go up. And as we mentioned, Chicago, one of the worst, the worst. I keep saying one of the worst, but they are the worst rebounding team in the NBA. So, we can expect at least a double-double out of Randle. I hope we start getting a little bit more of the other stats out of him, because he's producing 20 and 16 against Cleveland, but only 41 fantasy points because he had 1 assist and that was it. No steals, no blocks, nothing else. I would really like to start seeing additional numbers out of him. The steals way down. The blocks aren't there. He's not really a shot blocker. Earlier in the year, he was getting a lot of assists, giving you 4 or 5 assists a game. So, if we can get that back to, what he did, against San Antonio and teams like that, the 50 upsides there. But at 7,200, if he gives you 41, he's still giving you, 5.5x. So he's not killing you. So I think he's more of a cash game play. But he has GPP upside to pop if, he is able to just dish out some more baskets.
I think this is potential for the 50 burger. Plus, like you mentioned, 4 assists per game this year is appealing. I just want to circle back real quick because we got a starting lineup update.
Is it Diallo?
It is Diallo. And Terrence Ferguson's out. And, so when you look at their starting, the construction of their starting lineup, they're obviously starting smaller because they have Gallo at the 4, SGA. But SGA is 6'5". So I guess you can play him at small forward because someone that you left out of your playbook, and I'm kind of surprised about it, and you've been on him all year and he's crushed the last 2 games, is Dennis Schroder. So as much as it is Hamidou Diallo, I'm also interested in your feelings on Schroder because with Diallo now starting, now there's literally nobody on the second unit for OKC except Dennis Schroder. So, as much as we like the Diallo value entering the starting lineup, Dennis Schroder is going to be playing with Mike Muscala for 25 minutes today.
Yeah.
So, does that – I mean, we knew Ferguson was out, but we weren't, I guess, necessarily sure on who was going to start.
Yeah. Schroder was more of a victim. It was the victim of you can't write everybody up, sort of. And you do a good job. And honestly, it's probably a practice I should adopt too of, listing guys who were on the cusp but didn't make the playbook. We talked about him on the podcast. So, I mean, there was, some discussion about him there. So he wasn't completely, left out of our overall content. But for everybody who, does look at the playbook primarily, you're right. I mean, I've been on Schroder. I got him in all my seasonal league teams. I looked at that team. I looked at Russell Westbrook leaving and figured all the shots that were going to be available on that second unit. And he's come through. Got off to a slow start, but you're right. I mean, there's 30, 40 fantasy point upside here, 20 plus actual scoring upside. So, yeah, I don't mind. Obviously, the Pacers are a little bit of a better defensive team, but if he's getting second unit run, that means Brogdon's probably not out there. And that would probably be a better overall spot for him. So yeah, Schroeder's fine. Gallo's great, especially over on FanDuel. All those steals that he's gonna give you now. He's in the starting lineup. If you get 30 minutes at Gallo, I mean that could be really productive. Think like OG Anunoby light. Some rebounds, some steals, maybe a block, and if he gets you 8 to 10 points, you're looking at 30 plus fantasy points. So. I may once we get done with this, rework some Diallo lineups. I had already looked at him, but the 22 minutes a night that he plays kind of has you off him a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think he's worth consideration now.
It's 22 minutes, but improving because we've seen a significant uptick. Yes, 22, 23, but we saw 29, 32 last week too. So that was with the healthy Terrence Ferguson. I know we got off track a little bit, but I think it's worth mentioning.
No, I mean, he's a small forward on the. So he works. He fits.
Let's just finish the power forward position. We got a couple more. Yeah, I mean, Millsap at home. It's something that we've kind of been alluding to on the podcast. It was a thing last year. It's been a thing this year when you look at his splits. And one of your good friends who once worked here at Fantasy Alarm is not a fan of home road splits. Yeah. But when it's very apparent in specific players and specific instances, I think it is worth mentioning. It is a year and plus sample of Millsap just being good in Denver and not being good anywhere else. So,
I think that has a lot to do with the fact that visiting teams are typically, worn out by the elevation. They're not used to it. They ride in there was a stat that came in. I think it was the worst back-to-back in the NBA, over the last 5 or 6 years was into Denver or something like that, traveling into Denver or traveling into Utah. Both of those two were the worst, road destinations to go into. I know Atlanta's not on the back-to-back, but just going into Denver has such an impact on teams. So, I mean, it's funny that Millsap has success there. But more importantly, it's because he's matched up against Jabari Parker, who is basically a turnstile on the defensive end. On the flip side, Parker went for 60 fantasy points the other day because he only plays offense. Millsap's still he's not the defender he once was, obviously, but he's still not a terrible defender. Right. So I think that matchup's one to watch.
Interesting to note about Paul Millsap, 35 minutes in back-to-back games for a 35-year-old Paul Millsap. Right. Just interesting, and I do love the Jabari call for tournaments. I think that's an excellent call. Bam Adebayo, for whatever reason, is power forward on FanDuel. They will never get that right. You're just going to have to keep sending them tweets to their support about moving him.
I can only show them actual numbers so many times. So whatever.
Facts backed up by statistics. Yes. But
he's going to play 40 minutes tonight.
All the minutes. And his backup, because he's a power forward, is Kelly Olynyk. And Kelly Olynyk is going to play all the minutes because they don't have anyone. Right. So, you could probably spend up on Bam. I mean, this is a guy that we were paying for at $8,000. He's $6,800 on DK. Right. And then Kelly Olynyk's $3,900. And then Kyle Kuzma.
Yep.
For tournaments.
No minute restriction anymore.
No restriction. And who knows? And if Anthony Davis gets hurt, right?
Right. $4,600. So GBP darts, Kuzma certainly worth the play there against Phoenix. So you mentioned Bam, he works well. I had Myers Leonard written up as a center. Obviously, Olynyk would have been there had I thought Olynyk was going to play earlier today. It seemed like Olynyk was going to be out, and you really would have been desperate there.
Right.
I still think Myers Leonard's okay to play.
Yep.
He's $3,900 on DraftKings as well. Only a center on FanDuel, power forward center on DraftKings. So you're not going to at all play him on FanDuel because of how loaded center is. James, we'll just jump into it. I actually, unfortunately, will have to notch Embiid down a tick, not a ton, just a tick. With Simmons there, I actually know that Embiid and Simmons play very well together, and his fantasy points and whatnot are there. But I feel like having Simmons available just increases that blowout potential there against Cleveland. If it, instead of maybe being NATO, and Simmons still, a guy that's gets rebounds, he fills up the stat sheet. So I like Embiid. 9,400 on DraftKings is incredibly enticing, but you go down, you have Drummond with no Blake Griffin, no Derrick Rose. He's just going to get all that usage that we've seen from him, the previous games. So he's in a crush spot. A guy who you've heard me rail against all season long, Nikola Jokic.
All season? Singular?
Seasons.
Okay, thank you. It's definitely multiple seasons.
Yeah, I have to swallow that pill today. And I feel like I've been in this situation before where it's been like Jokic versus Atlanta, you have to play him, but he's never been $8,300.
Never.
On that, and that's of course
never been $8,300.
Yeah, he's never been $8,300. So you have to play him there because if he gets you 5x, then he's getting you 41.5 fantasy points, and that's basically what it usually gives you. So I'm okay with that. I'm not okay paying 10.5 for him when he gives me 41.
Right.
But if he's going to give me 8.3 at 41, well, then I can at least swallow it, knowing that there's also the triple-double upside where he can get you 60. He's going up against Alex Len, who I'm laughing while I'm saying his name, and possibly Jabari Parker's going to be hanging around down low.
Damon Jones, who's starting tonight, over Len.
Damon Jones even. It's just, Jokic should be, I'm expecting, and I know the ownerships don't display that, I'm expecting Jokic to be the top-owned center, at least in GBP lineups. That matchup's just too hard to ignore. Whiteside, 2 straight games at over 30 minutes now against Sacramento, a spot we love the matchup. They're still going the foul-happy Rashawn Holmes. Seemingly Shaq and Barkley just lit a fire under Whiteside after ripping him a couple games ago against the Clippers. You look at those numbers are there. $6,900. We talked about it on the podcast. I kind of reiterated it. I think in his little blurb there, this is the night where you're playing 2 centers on DraftKings. You're filling one in at your util. You're filling the other one in at your center spot. You're just going for it. Didn't even mention yet Gobert, who has what we've always considered to be the best matchup against centers, and that's against Brooklyn. Gobert had a huge game last night, thanks to you saying he doesn't get any shots. He went 11 for 12 on the field.
Of course.
So he crushed it. Again, back-to-back against Brooklyn. Hard to hate that. And again, I threw in Myers Leonard, but we don't really need to expand on that. He has had good success when he's played over 30 minutes this year. He actually put up some decent numbers, but I don't know the role there. we did just get the update. The Sixers are starting Korkmaz tonight with no Horford.
I kind of like that.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. He's gone for like 24 fantasy points in multiple games in a row.
Just the other day, 28 minutes. I mean, you look at the minutes in general, they're all there. So it's not like he's a guy that's playing 10, getting bumped up, and maybe he'll play 25. He's already playing 25 to 30. So, yeah, I mean, you just need the shots to be there, really.
You need the shots to be there. He's scoring dependent. I mean, look at the games. It's very scoring dependent. Yep. But, like, with Ben Simmons, who's kind of pass first, I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yep, it's certainly possible, definitely. It's not... again, it's not like the most ideal scenario because he won the game, but he's $4,200. So I mean, if you're really just looking for some salary savers, maybe he's the guy that plays 33 minutes tonight because he's starting. So that's my overall take here, James. Any final thoughts for you?
Are you buying? You're a revenge guy.
Yeah. And
we have Bobby Portis going back to Chicago after going 28-11 against Chicago earlier in the year. That was in New York. Now he's going to Chicago, where he was last seen punching out Nikola Mirotic. Mirotic won't be there, so he won't have a chance to swing. Maybe he'll actually make it through this whole game. Are you buying into the Portis revenge?
Yeah, I'm going to have to check in with Sean Mitchell because he actually was on the Bobby Portis revenge game.
All over that.
All over it the other day. So we'll have to ask Sean in chat. Hopefully he's watching and he can just respond. But if not, we'll get him to call out if it's a Bobby Portis night or not. More impressively, 29 minutes against Cleveland the other day, 2 for 10 from the field, still gave you 30 fantasy points. So, the upside is for sure there. If everything comes together, for Bobby Portis, we know the upside he brings. So, go ahead, GBP Dart works.
I think that does it. If you... we'll save the questions for chat. 6:36. John lineups out. Coming out.
Labs coming out.
Any minute
news. Had to wait for it.
Any second, lineups will be out. Thank you to our producer Matt Sells, as always, as he's watching Brink in the background now that Disney Plus has arrived. But good luck getting your lineups tonight. We'll catch you guys in the winner's circle.